Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Tuesday, so we are looking at a new Sam Kieth issue, namely issue 4 of the MAXX, cover dated August 1993. Not much to say about the cover other than it's pretty cool. I like the depiction of the MAXX's anatomy here. You can tell that Sam Kieth has a really sound understanding of musculature anatomy, the human anatomy. But as you can see clearly in this image here, he tends to push that, exaggerate it, make it his own. Very cartoony to a certain extent and also illustrative at the same time in the technique and the inking. And, you know, Sam Kieth has always had kind of a, left to center kind of offbeat style, which you can definitely see here, which I've always really enjoyed, right? Very different from the other stuff that was kind of being published in the early 90s. I like the kind of cartoony background characters that we have here, the graffiti kind of aspect of the background, and also the color scheme, the purples and the greens, the secondary colors, thrown in there with a bit of orange and stuff, just kind of gives it a slightly kind of psychedelic effect, which I think is really cool. And of course, to just have a pretty head-on shot of a character's buttocks is kind of funny to me, was funny to me as a kid, and is funny now. So let's crack her open, have a look inside, see what's going on. So, story art, budget dialogue by Sam Kieth, swell dialogue by Bill Messner-Loebs. I'm assuming Sam Kieth is saying that his dialogue kind of sucks, and thankfully Bill Messner-Loebs is there to kind of sweeten it up and polish it up, maybe. Maybe he's very kind of self-defeating and his dialogue is actually not that bad. Finishes by Jim Sinclair. He's kind of an assistant who helps with inking and sometimes I think actually does complete panels. Lettering by Mike Heisler and colors by Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. So pretty good, interesting looking introduction page, first page. The MAXX in his kind of bum gear in the real world when he's not fantasizing about his imaginary kind of Australian outback world where he's a hero. And I like the way his name has been integrated kind of into the background here, even with the exclamation mark. I think the design kind of, the way this element is used as design is very good. Kind of a concrete archway, which I assume is meant to kind of evoke the bridge that we see here. That'll become a little bit more important or more obvious later to the story. So here's kind of where the MAXX starts to drop off a bit for me. I mentioned last issue 3 is kind of the maxiest of all the MAXX issues to me and has most of what I was kind of expecting from the series. Here's in this issue anyways, and it kind of goes up and down, veers in and out of this kind of stuff throughout the next few issues. But this is the first issue where I was like, I don't know about this series, right? Because this issue tends to focus on all the secondary characters who are just kind of normal human beings. And like I said, when I was 12 or 13 reading this, I would have been 12 around when this came out, just not the kind of subject matter that I'm really into. It almost became, not in any gory or sexual way or with that kind of material, but the MAXX became a mature reader's title just because it was kind of, a lot of the stuff that they were talking about was just not of interest to me as a kid, or probably way above my head. Back then. So here's an example where most of this issue focuses on secondary characters, more human characters. Not that that's a bad thing. It's his own series and he's allowed to go in the directions that he wants, referring to Sam Kieth. But like I said, when I was a 12-year-old kid, just not the kind of stuff that I was actually looking into and was interested in. So I kept with the series for a while, at least for the artwork, because I always still liked the Sam Kieth artwork, and he's still doing really cool, different, interesting layouts all over the place, right? He's really avoiding the basic square grid or reinterpreting it in interesting ways like here. But there's just something about the story matter, the actual storylines and the secondary characters that just really didn't interest me as much. It was getting very psychological and into trauma and stuff, and that just wasn't what I was into back in the day. I can appreciate it more now, obviously, but that's just not what I was looking for. But I was still getting my Sam Kieth art fix. I still really loved his, rough inking and his super interesting layouts and stuff. Still doing a really good job here. It's just, I really appreciated more when he applied it to the MAXX character and, again, not to the secondary characters. So we're basically introduced to the characters surrounding the MAXX. We're introduced to Sarah, who I think, I don't want to get too much into it, was sexually assaulted in a prior issue. Then we meet one of her friends here, Jimmy, who I don't even think really plays that much of a role in the rest of the series. I do like this kind of image here. I think this is a quick kind of jab at Sandman and the kind of people who enjoy that series, right? So he's famously, Sam Kieth worked on the first few issues of Sandman, and the editor just threw him off, didn't like his art or something. So maybe there's a bit of a grudge there that he's holding. But I do think it's funny when we get those kind of meta comments in comics. You know, back then we didn't have the internet. We can go research this stuff, but I did have a sense that Sam Kieth was definitely, you know, it's obviously he's poking fun at death, but that there's kind of maybe a personal story behind it, which I later found out once I found out that he had actually drawn a few issues of Sandman in the early beginnings of that series, the Neil Gaiman written series. Here's an example of, for example, if you look at this panel here, I would almost be willing to bet, and maybe this panel here too, both of these were not drawn by Sam Kieth. They were drawn by his assistant Sinclair, because you can see a total, you know, maybe he's trying to reproduce the Sam Kieth compositions and stuff to a certain extent, but when it comes to the actual inking and lines, just worlds away from Sam Kieth. Totally different textures and line work in these two panels here, right? As compared to maybe the rough and tumble kind of inking that we get more typically from Sam Kieth here, and even in the head here, bit of cartooniness. So I'll try to point those out as we go along. I don't feel that Sam Kieth was abusive in using an assistant. It was definitely mostly to help him hit his deadlines. But there are examples of it as you're going through, and I'll try to point those out. For example, you know, these characters back here in this car and stuff, I definitely think that was his assistant. Sam Kieth definitely did the foreground kind of elements of the MAXX here. And I mean, how cool is it that he, and interesting as an artist, to look at this and go, man, he just literally just, you know, threw in the arm kind of in the foreground, and that's enough, and looks pretty cool actually, and that's enough to clue us in as to the MAXX character showing up, right? Just an odd kind of cropping that I think works really well. Again, the inking, look at the inking on that, all the Sam Kieth kind of rough and tumble feathering and stuff, I think is great. The kind of inky, messy kind of line he uses here for the end of the gloves that were, you know, plunged in lava, I think it looks great. And even kind of this kind of dirty, choppy, thick line that he uses here. All the stuff I love about Sam Kieth and his texture work. And again, I think a lot of this is drawn, maybe the basic figures by Sam Kieth here, but the inking and stuff here, and all of these is done, I would, you know, pretty much bet it was all Sinclair. Even here, you can see here in the way the MAXX's arm is drawn, clearly different types of lines, thinner lines, not so much texture and hatching, right? And not as gritty and dirty as the Sam Kieth lines. So I think definitely most of the stuff maybe in this sequence here was drawn by his assistant Sinclair. And then we get to this stuff. Once again, I love these interesting layouts and these kind of introduction lettering that he does for each character. It looks great. Always love the overlaps into other panels if it's done well, which it is here. And Sam Kieth, known for drawing cartoony, yet somewhat, at least in their body type, realistic ladies and females, right? And I mean, Julie definitely has that hippie vibe, right, in the way she dresses, and used to maximum effect here with the shoes and the pants, and just the interesting textures as well that Sam Kieth uses on the clothing, I think is great. Yeah, Julie's always kind of posing a bit, just slightly pinup girl, not too gratuitous, not too sexual, but yeah, knowing her history, you know, kind of be in bad taste to do that, but again, just love on her figure, the clothing, all those Sam Kieth textures. He's even using the phone cord kind of texture here for Sarah's hair, that he used for kind of the rips on Wolverine's costume in past Marvel Comics Presents issues and stuff. Here's another, I've talked before about Sam Kieth and the level of art, where sometimes he goes more illustrative and really kind of precise, and sometimes he goes cartoonier, and that level of drawing changes. Here's a good example of it where I think it works really well. You know, all of this is drawn pretty well in the Sam Kieth style, a little bit cartoony, all the right textures and stuff. But I like these little insert panels here where he really kind of goes naive and almost like, you know, amateurish or cartoony-ish, you know, to someone who doesn't necessarily draw professionally, but he incorporates it into a scene where you've got perspective and background details, and, you know, clearly someone who's skilled at drawing, and then doing something where, you know, you're evoking a style that's naive or like a child style that's not quite, you know, worked out yet. And you know, the parallels of putting those two next to each other, right? The opposition it creates. Here's another interesting, I've mentioned before, I'll say it again, those double page spreads, right? So we've got the big spread of Sarah and just the silhouette and the rain and all that. It's a pretty doom and gloom kind of issue, right? Some heavy stuff that they're talking about. In her case, like I said, the sexual assault and her thoughts of suicide, right? So heady stuff when I'm 12 years old that I'm not necessarily at that point either mature enough or just really interested in that. It's not really, at least by, when I was 12 years old, not these things were not concerns of mine just yet, right? I love the panel border here, which I definitely think he came back, a Sam Keith staple is coming back with white ink and creating, kind of rough lines and stuff. And you get a bit of dry brush effect, which I think always looks really cool. And again, the double page spread with the insert panels. I love that stuff. You still get some storytelling, and then you get a big kind of interesting, pretty quote unquote canvas to look at. So here's another part that when I was a kid, just either didn't interest me or was above my head. So Julie and the MAXX have gone to see the movie Indecent Proposal. If I'm not mistaken, Indecent Proposal is with Demi Moore and Woody Harrelson, and some rich guy who I think is Richard Gere proposes to Woody Harrelson to sleep with his wife for one night for $1 million or something, right? I could be wrong with some of the details, but I think it's something like that. So Max comes out and he starts up with, so the movie was sexist. Excuse me, Julie says. It was just a movie. Can't you ever relax? Can we go to a movie and your knee is jerking so much I can't hear? Not only did it semi-endorse prostitution, but did you catch the bit about the ditzy secretary reading Falucci's book Backlash? What was the message here? There, huh? Feminists or airheads? Falucci is a paranoid and you're worse. That was just a joke. Oh, hi, Sarah. What are you doing? Nothing, big fat nothing. So not going to focus on the Sarah plot line here. Focusing on what's said about this. This is the part where, just not in my interest, way above my head. I kind of understand when I'm 12 years old about feminism and prostitution. I know, I'm not, innocent and naive. It's just, I haven't read this book. I don't know who these feminist icons or people involved in feminism are. So this part just, completely, I got to be honest, kind of alienates me as a 12-year-old. This is not the kind of stuff I'm into or going to be going to research at the library when I'm 12 years old to find out more about, right? Just like I said, it was just a weird, odd aspect of the series that really comes out in this part here that I just have to say was totally above my head and not of interest to me. So off they go, and here they're attacked by Izzes once again. These characters I haven't mentioned, but they look like this in the real world, but really what they are those Izzes, those little black characters that the MAXX confronts, sometimes in the real world and sometimes in the Australian outback of his fantasy. This whole page is, I love how, this shot of the MAXX with his pupils all of a sudden is just kind of funny to me, but interesting. The level of drawing once again kind of just, it gets cartoonier and quicker, but I like how it's done. It just, it works really well for me. And even though it's done kind of scratchy and quickly and sketchy, I think the size of the car all of a sudden in this panel is hilarious. And that he actually pulls them in, to fight him in the car is just a nice kind of sequence here. Eventually they pop out. And just a kind of a cool sequence of the MAXX fighting the Izzes. I like the way the is cartoony interpretation already, more exaggerated here. For some reason, they're still wearing the glasses. I guess the glasses help disguise them is kind of the idea. And I think this shot of the MAXX here, once again, one of those cool Sam Keith images of the MAXX, a little bit rough, really textured inking. And, this decision to all of a sudden just kind of draw a straight line here, which you'd think is odd. It looks a little weird, but really what it does is it helps drive home the point of the movement of the arm here into the Izz's head, into the car door there. Helped, obviously, with these quote-unquote speed lines, but done in the kind of unimitable or not copyable, I guess is what I'm trying to say, Sam Keith way with these kind of, quickly dashed out lines and a bit of white dry brush once again used up here. So all this is going on, and Sarah is just kind of at the breaking point, I guess, with her psychological issues. So, you know, she's like, nothing makes any sense, and if it makes any sense, then it's all got to stop. So, you know, what we're seeing here is obviously her struggling with possibly wanting to kill herself and commit suicide. So eventually, obviously, it doesn't happen. Art-wise, I think all of this is pretty interesting. I like the texture on the gun here, really well done. This, you know, Sarah often, because of her doom and gloom kind of disposition, is represented in silhouette pretty much throughout the issue. And because, you know, of her glasses and her hair, that's pretty much all we need to understand that character is Sarah. So the iconography, even for just kind of a regular human character in the series, is pretty well thought out, I think. As is Julie's, right? You know, she's kind of iconic in a way, as is, you know, Sarah, almost more of a symbol. And I love this shot of the MAXX here. Now all of a sudden the MAXX, you know, Sam Keith throughout the series is experimenting with the MAXX's look and size and proportions. I mentioned that. Here all of a sudden he throws in, you know, some leopard spots or something on his back. You know, you'll notice that these blotchy ink lines sometimes go up just the forearm, sometimes, you know, the bicep. Even in this case, he's just decided all of a sudden it goes up to the shoulder. You know, there's some inconsistencies along the way, but that's part of also what makes the artwork interesting, I think. And now we're back to kind of where the beginning of the story was, where we were under the bridge. I don't know if there's a bit of Nirvana inspiration there, from you know, some of the legends of Kurt Cobain living under a bridge, which have been disproved. He didn't ever live under a bridge. He just kind of hung out there, which is kind of normal. In places where there are bridges, teenagers will hang around under bridges. You know, I did it as a kid. So I don't think it's anything that's, you know, in any way kind of abnormal. It's a nice place to get away. And that's the end of the issue. Got a few kind of fan art images here. Pretty interesting. Always thought this one was pretty cool. This one just being a little bit just straight up copied from some of the earlier MAXX issues. And we've got the Maximum Sound, the cassette kind of audio follow along that was created in the early 90s. I actually had a copy of this. I loved it. It actually reminded me of when I was even younger and I would read, you know, I did a review of a Transformers book that I would read and follow along with a cassette. So when this came out years later, funny enough, there was a nostalgia effect when I was 12 years old to when I was like 5. You know, you haven't lived much, but, you know, 7 years in the past is pretty far back. Almost feels like nostalgia. So, you know, definitely an item I wanted to get my hands on and eventually did. And I remember listening to it a bunch of times. You know, it was very, very entertaining, very fun kind of derived product from the series, right? You know, sometimes merch and stuff feels like cash grabs and, you know, there's some stuff I feel is kind of useless. I'm not really into the derivative products, but this is one in relation to the MAXX I thought was really cool. So, Mark Silvestri Cyberforce trade paperback. I didn't even know that existed. I don't think I've ever seen a copy of that. I've seen the original series, but I'd definitely be interested in seeing the trade. Just curious if there's some extra bits in there that might be interesting, some sketchbook stuff or whatever. If anyone has any ideas on that, has seen it before and has some details, let me know in the comments. I was about to say Trencher number 0. I never saw that. I love Trencher, and I have every issue, the whole Image series, and even the there was like a Christmas special or something produced by published by Black Ball Entertainment that only lasted, I think, that one issue. So almost got scared that I missed a Trencher issue, but yeah, fat chance of that ever happening. Great marketing from Keith Giffen. Always kind of tongue-in-cheek humor with that guy. And he's another guy I will start reviewing eventually, because there's a lot of really cool Keith Giffen comics that I think are worth looking at. He's quite an experimenter and tried lots of different styles throughout his career, so that's another interesting aspect of what he did in the comics world. And of course, just like every other Image comic, there's going to be a MAXX card set. After the Marvel Universe cards, Series 1 and 2, I kind of dropped off for the cards. I was much more interested in the comics. So even back then, I think I was smart enough, budget-wise, not to waste my money on the derivative stuff that didn't interest me, like the cards, and save some of that money for comics, right? Because that was really the thing I was into. So there you go. That is the MAXX issue 4. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any answers to my questions, let me know in the comments. Thank you to my almost hitting that 250 goal 250 subscribers. We're almost there. So my loyal subscribers, thank you so much. Hope you're still enjoying all my videos. Let me know in the comments if you are, if there's any improvements you'd like to see or certain books you'd like me to review. Definitely open to that. Those of you who are watching and like the show but are not subscribed, please do so. It helps us, get the word out about big baby reviews to other people who might be interested, and it helps the channel grow and it motivates us to create more content that hopefully you are enjoying. So with that, I just want to wish everyone out there an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MAXX13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MAXX or Big Baby.